So it has happened. Games Workshop have sentenced another game to death, and I didn't even get to buy any of the miniatures this time. And then on top of that, they've also started disappearing Warhammer 40k products into the ether, which is a discredited Victorian concept, by the way, so that just means they're gone forever. And you might have missed this news. It was hidden pretty handily by Games Workshop. They didn't draw attention to it, just carefully snuck it out when no one was looking. And really, it took a leak for us to find out that this is happening at all. So what the hell is going on? Well, I am of course talking about the death of Warhammer the Old World. And I'm sure you're quite shocked to hear this because Warhammer the Old World is still pretty new. I mean, sure, it was announced like 6, 7, 8 years ago, and it's based on a game that dates back to a time when people had to use birds to play their vinyl records. Or even just had vinyl records. But in reality, this game was only released like 4 months ago. It only has 3 available factions to buy, and we're almost half a year into production. And yet, it was still singled out by Games Workshop for a really severe kicking that has left it pretty well battered. And why? Well, according to Games Workshop, Warhammer the Old World is just too gosh darn affordable. You know, if you think that 30-year-old models being sold at $20 a pop is affordable. But hey, I guess the troops like the peasant bowmen are $2.50 a mini, which actually, yeah, in the context of Warhammer, that's extremely affordable, almost on par with other companies like Warlord Games, Perry Miniatures, and War Games Atlantic. Just don't look at any of the special characters, the comparison falls down a little then. But alas, this sliver of sort of competitive pricing has been noticed by Games Workshop, and as a result, they have upped the price on the entire Warhammer the Old World product line by a pretty insane degree, to the extent that it's going to devastate the future of the game. And we only really know about this thanks to leaks from Games Workshop. Now, this is taking place alongside the annual Warhammer price rise. I mean, usually they do it in March, but hey, this year we got till May. Aren't we lucky? And yes, this happens every single year. This is like my 5th video criticizing a Warhammer price rise, and is very unlikely to be the last. But this year it has been different, because the price rise was on average relatively low, a mere 3 to 5% average price increase, and as a result I have been swarmed by desperate sycophants, brown tongues wagging for Games Workshop about how the price rise this year, because we all knew it was coming, is actually very low. The luxury Warhammer hobby hasn't gotten too much more expensive, so we should be all clapping, right? Well, no, because the price shouldn't be going up at all. None of my other hobbies have gone up in price this month. I mean, I love to read books, but my book reading hobby doesn't go up in price annually. Sorry, did I call that my book reading hobby? I meant my Conan hobby. So I'm not going to celebrate Games Workshop's restraint here. I mean, they've only decided to cut off a few fingers, and this comes on the back of 2 other really large price increases across the whole Warhammer range in the last few years, especially back in 2022 when they did a 5% price rise across the board, as well as resin going up 10% and metal 20%. And then in their article announcing this price rise, they have the gall to plead poverty. I mean, plastic costs are $1 per kilogram, and increasingly the artistry of miniature manufacturing, sculpture, sculpting, and design is being automated. But you know, the price of food, materials, and transportation have been trending upward. So why can't Games Workshop get a slightly bigger piece of the pie too? Just ignore that Warhammer is more popular than ever. Games Workshop have never been more profitable. And overall, Warhammer and miniatures have never been bigger. Arguably, this is the best time to reduce prices, hold sales, and get more people onboarded into play. Seriously, money is not a problem for Games Workshop. This isn't poverty. This is desire. This is driven by by a perception from the Games Workshop executive team that there is shareholder demand for this. And ultimately, for the game, it means that only those who can afford to spend a lot can afford Warhammer. Now, that doesn't mean only rich people, of course, that's a myth. But those who are willing or unable to resist paying more for Warhammer consist mostly of vulnerable groups, like compulsive spenders or those who have a neurodivergence or are susceptible to FOMO tactics, aka Games Workshop's vaunted whales. And that guarantees that the game will always be niche. It'll always be small in terms of player base because it's just too expensive for most people to play. But it doesn't have to be. Here's the top 5 best-selling miniature lines, and Nullzor's miniatures are number 2 on this list. Age of Sigmar isn't even on this thing, but Nullzor's shows up on this list every single year. Yet where Warhammer is selling individual miniatures for like $25 a pop, Nullzor is selling them for $5. I mean, sure, the quality is a bit lower, but they're fine game pieces and far more affordable and accessible. But okay, the price is going up. At least it's only 4%, right? Well, firstly, not if you're in Sweden or Norway. Prices are going up between 8 and 14% there. I guess the Scandies are still paying for the Danelaw. But otherwise, yes, it's a 4% increase on average. And it turns out that the word average is doing a lot of work because the new prices have been leaked. But it turns out that some game lines are being treated very differently from others. Like some are being straight up murdered, especially Warhammer the Old World. And this is why. Here we can see leaked figures, and in this we have the new upcoming prices of the Old World miniatures. And boy, is Old World being hit hard here. Prices are going up double the average from 8% all the way to almost 12% increase on some of the Old World battalions. Tomb King troops, Orc Boys, Goblin troops, all the Lang troops are going up across the board at least 8% in price. These are really, really big price rises. This will be felt in stores, and this will be felt by the Warhammer Old World community. And it is absolutely devastating for the game. It's a very recent game line, and it's trying to find its footing in the market. Although I must have been wrong in my previous videos, because I had previously assumed that Old World was just selling okay, nothing special. But it must be selling really well, because why else put the prices up on the entire product line? Why else single it out for this type of treatment? And obviously, it goes without saying, Warhammer the Old World has a lot of old models. They are basically free money for Games Workshop at this stage, and they should not go up in price. But that's not all. It gets even worse, because apparently Games Workshop hate me in particular, because they also just discontinued a whole bunch of Warhammer 40k, all without warning, and what they've cancelled is actually, for me, particularly devastating. For one, they have just ended the best combat patrol in the history of Warhammer, the one that belongs to a faction that I own, and one that I really, really wanted to pick up before it was snapped out of existence. The Gene Stealer Cultist Combat Patrol. I could really use some of the models in here, and I guess I won't be able to get them at a bundle price anymore, because it is no longer available to buy at all, and has been harder to find for sale in the last few days than an unstained casting couch. And this was one of the few 40k combat patrols that could be argued to contain actually really good value. But as punishment for its sins, it is now gone, ended without warning. And it's not alone. We've also lost the Sisters of Battle Combat Patrol, which, while less good, I actually kinda liked. I mean, say what you want about it and the monopose fit of the models in here, but I always liked that it had a huge variety of different miniatures and gave a great taste of the Sisters of Battle. Needs a smidge more hate. And it makes, or made, for a really good introduction to the faction. So why have these disappeared? Well, they're being cancelled so the Games Workshop can replace them with worse versions, with worse combat patrols at the launch of the new codex for each respective faction. This is the way that Games Workshop do things now. Every single faction update now comes with a shittier, worse value version of their existing combat patrol. Orcs got the chop last month, and now the 2 armies that I collect are due for the slaughter this month. month. Real bummer. I mean, I knew this was coming and I wanted to pick up one of the Genestealer cultist patrols, but I didn't expect them to disappear quite so fast, quite so suddenly, and quite so without warning. Like I'm living in a photograph with Stalin in it. And this decision to discontinue the older combat patrols in favor of new has never made sense to me, considering that combat patrol is a legitimate way of playing Warhammer now, and there are rules for these combat patrol boxes in that new game mode. I mean, sure, bring out new combat patrol boxes during the release of the next codex, that's fine, but they should be released in addition to the older combat patrols, not replacements. That way there'd be a bit more variety for the combat patrol game mode, and we get access to more models at bundle prices. But no, Games Workshop just want things to be worse. I mean, what other explanation is there? Because as much as they have claimed that the average price rise is up 3 to 5% in their annual price increase this year, that's all just a smokescreen. The real price rise comes from Games Workshop doing things like these combat patrol replacements, reducing the number of miniatures that we get in new bundles, and just creating new miniatures to replace the old ones, and upping the prices on those new models as a way to obfuscate price rises. I mean, take the new Deathwing Knight Terminators. They're $70 for 5 models. That's way higher than any older models. Or take my favorite, the Imperial Guard Infantry miniatures. These used to be $30 a box like 5 years ago, and then they went up in price to $35, and then they got deleted and replaced by a $50 box set. That is a price rise, just way more sneaky. And every new release follows this same trend, from Termagants to Brood Brothers, all in an excuse to make wargamers pay more for the same amount of plastic. New models are cool, new prices, not so much. Really, Games Workshop double dip on these price rises, and their increased profits show that. So, no, I will not thank Games Workshop for their restraint. They should be following in the footsteps of other wargame companies like Parabellum, who in 2023 actually reduced prices because things just aren't so gnarly anymore. So instead, I'm going to applaud Parabellum, although I would appreciate it if you could reduce the price on these genies more. But that's what I argue for on this channel, more consumer-friendly behavior from wargame companies. And if you want to support my quest in that, why not subscribe to the channel, or check out my Patreon at patreon.com/discourse miniatures for reviews, streams, a free miniature horror game, and help me keep the lights on even when I'm deathly ill. And a massive thanks to my patrons, especially CryptoKev. Bye bye.